In this lecture, we will learn about the second NoSQL model, which is document model. Here we go. Okay, here let's have a look. What does it mean by document model? A document model could be considered as a specialized key value store. That means it has a concept of key associating or referencing to an object or a value. But the special case of this is that the object must be a document, and in most cases, the document is JSON document. So in this example, we can see that we could define the key to be iPhone 13 while it associates to a document that may describe about the product iPhone 13. Or another example here is that we have the key China, and it refers to or referencing to a document in the XML format. So we can actually see that it is a specialized key value in the sense that instead of storing any value, it stores document. And the document in the document model may follow or may not follow schema restrictions. That means it's considered to be schemaless model. And also within the document itself, we can also query. That means we can query by the part of the structure of the document. We can query according to the content or the value within the document and something like that. So this slide summarizes the important characteristics of document model. First, it is a specialized key value store. Second, it is designed for storing, retrieving, and managing document-oriented data. And such kind of data is known as semi-structured data. An example of such semi-structured data could be XML or HTML document, could be JSON, could be BSON. And the last important characteristic is that it provides a query and update mechanism through a query language that allow us to query or to retrieve data based on the internal structure within the document. These slides show us an example of a JSON document. I will explain this example later, but what we could see from this is that JSON or the document structure allow us flexible schema mechanism to store data. That means it supports data types, various data types. It supports complex data structure. It is also developer friendly, and in conclusion, it is very flexible. So let's have a look in detail. From the previous example, this document structure following JSON syntax, you could see that a document has this syntax that is we encode the data within brace, curly brace, and then inside you can have several attributes to encode the data that you want. Okay, here let me highlight the attribute. These are examples of attributes such as ID, first name, last name, email, and so on. Okay, so with this structure, you can see that we have an attribute, then a colon, and after that you can have a value. Such as for this ID attribute, the value is 001, 003 ABC. And then the second attribute, you have the attribute first name and then the value John. So what you could see from here is that different value can have different data types, such as the first one and the second one, and many of these in this example, they are string data type. Okay, while this one, the value 55 1000 for the attribute points, right? You can see they are numbers. It represents the data following the number data type. And that means from here, every string must be encoded within double quote, right? While when it is number, you can see that it's not in the quote. Okay, what else? This is about data structure, right? Then the next is about some complex structure. We can see that for this attribute interest, the value associated with this attribute interest has two nested value, and we use arrays to store this data. It's a kind of array storing the two items, sports and movies, and we use this symbol to represent an array structure. Okay, this square bracket. And the next structure is a kind of nested document. Okay, so with this nested document structure, in this example, you can see it starts with, it is for the attribute address. Here, this is attribute address, and the value associated with the attribute address is a document. So that means anything inside this document for the address can be a nested document that follow JSON structure. So that is why it can have another set of property or attributes and value. So this is street with the value 1212 Maple Street, and also the attribute city with the value San Jose, and so on. The last example here for the attribute is sessions, and you can see what data structure it is for this session. Yes, when we see this, it means that it has an array as it associates the value for sessions to an array, and this array consists of two documents. This is document number 1 and this is document number 2. Okay, and document number 1 has an attribute ID and another attribute, another attribute TS for timestamp. So this is to store the session, the user session with the ID and with the timestamp. So there are two sessions stored here, okay, in this example. Okay, so what does this JSON document contain? It contains data about, supposed to be customer, right? Could be customer data. That is, we have his or her ID, first name, last name, email, date of birth, and points, interest, and the address. As well as we have the sessions data, that perhaps when did the customer log into the system. Okay, here let's compare between relational data model versus document data model. In relational model, of course, okay, let's focus here. In relational model, we store data in a database. So here we have database, right? And then within database, we have a collection of tables. And within tables, we have rows and then columns. This is what we have in relational model. Compared to document, okay, again, document, we have the concept of database as well, okay, but within the database, it has a collection of collections. It consists of collections, and inside collections, we can have many documents, and within documents, you have many fields or what we saw previously, attributes, okay. So in order to compare them one by one, you can see that here, okay, the concept of database is the same. Tables in relational model could be considered or mapped. If we want to do a mapping, it can be considered as a collection. Okay, a table is a collection. And then each row within a table could be considered as a document within the collection. And then the column in relational model is a field or an attribute within the document. And remember that in relational model, we can have relationships between or among tables, right? And we make use of primary key, foreign key, and then we join them based on these concepts of relationships, right? And that means we can have one-to-one relationship, one-to-many relationship, many-to-many relationship, or even self-referencing relationship. Okay. When we talk about document model, of course, we can have relationships between or among documents as well. And it can be relationships among collections of documents too. And we will use mechanism that we will learn later, that is embedded and linking, as well as we make use of multi-value field types in order to store the relations among the collection. Okay. Most document stores support CRUD operations. That means it supports creation, retrieval, update, and deletion. Let's summarize here about document model concept. First, we can use it to store data in flexible JSON-like documents. Second, the fields or the attributes in a document can vary from one document to another. That means data structure of a document may not be exactly the same with another document. That means we don't have a concept of very strict schema to follow. So documents can have different data structure. And this data structure of a particular document can change over time as well. And last but not least, the model support complex queries, indexing, and aggregation. Let us have a look at this example. Suppose that we want to store data about products in our stores, and we have very variety of products. That is, it can be bicycles, and it can be parts, related parts for bicycles as well. Okay, and each of these products may have different description structure. For example, of course, we may have something similar, that is, every product has the name, has a description, has a picture, and the price, but certain details such as the weight, the size, the dimension, and many more could be very different and vary. So we may not want to have a very strict schema for our product, in which if we look at our relational model, right, you may need to define very strict or very fixed table structure or schema structure, and every product item will need to follow the same schema. But here, if our products are very different, we may not want to have a very fixed schema and structure that is common to every product. Okay, so let's have a look next. This is the case when we try to model our product catalog or product description in relational model. It would end up having this very complex structure because we want to have the attributes that is possible for different types of products. So we try to model them completely. And with that very complex table structure and the entity relationship that is shown here, as you see, right? If we want to retrieve one single product and associated details or descriptions such as the price, the type, some of the product attributes, and so on, we may need to write very complex SQL statement that consists of very many joins. You can see here, this is to select, this is a SQL select statement, right? It has nested structure. Okay, it make use of left join. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5 left joins as well, and that could be slow in terms of execution. On the other hand, if we make use of document model and document structure, okay, which offer flexible schema structure for modeling our data as a document. So here is an example of one document which describes this product, that is a bicycle. Okay, you can see that we make use of JSON document right here. Start a document with curly braces, and then it has an ID. Our bicycle has an ID, a name, a brand, a category, a type, and a price. Also then the size, the wheel size. Okay, all of these are simple attributes with just the associated string or number. Then we have some complex attribute, that is frame set, which has a nested document right here. You can see frame set has nested document with the attribute frame and fork. Okay, then we have a group set, another nested document, an attribute with a nested document as a value, then a wheel set, and so on. Okay, so we can see that we store the product as an object, a document object. And when we do a retrieval, okay, this example use MongoDB query syntax. Okay, so we just retrieve the products by its ID, and we want to retrieve just one single product. That means the product catalog or product description of this particular product with this particular ID. Okay, search by ID, find by ID. Then we can see with these 3 examples that we can have very different structure, very different variation from one document to another. So here all the 3 documents, right? This document number 1, it is used for describing a product, which is our bike. Okay, type road bike, category bike, right? So this is product 1, okay, document number 1. And then for the product number 2, right, or we use document number 2 here, is a component of bicycle, which is under a category pedals. Okay, and then the next one, the last one, is under the clothing type with the category jersey. So you can have a look that each of these different products, 1, 2, and 3, they have very different structure. So the very first 6 attributes are the same, follow the same structure. That is, it has name, ID, brand, category, type, and price, right? But while the rest are very different, it really depends on what type or category of the product. Then the attributes will follow those type or those category, as you can see from here. We can also see from here that when we want to add new attribute into the document, it will become very easy. For example, if we want to add or have a new requirement that a user can give a rating and can give comments related to the product, right? Then we can insert that kind of attribute into the product itself directly, like this. This part shows it. And remember that originally our product may have this original description or attributes, right? Then we just insert these 3 additional attributes of comments, of ratings, and so on. Okay, here is the next. How can we model this new product? Suppose that we have new product in our store, right? So how can we model it in JSON? Look at it. It is a kind of baseball glove. Okay, and these are some of the product description that we may want to store. So here would be the resulting JSON object that we could design. For example, of course, say that this is a document, right? Inside we have field or attribute category with particular value, and then the next one is model with the value, and so on and so on. Okay, so you can see the values we have could be of different types, and the value or the field can be typed. It depends. If you want it to be strictly typed, you can define that. If not, you can make it very flexible, that different JSON object or different document can follow different structure or may not need to follow the same structure. And with this, we can see that our document can have rich structure. Rich in the sense that it can have very various structures, and we can even have complex structure, not only simple property or attribute values. So here is an example of an array, right? And with this, you can see we could keep adding more details into our document. So from previous slide, we see only this part, right? Now we add more, such as the endorsed of the sport player who used to use this brand or this model. And also you can see that there is another history field which gives us an idea that we can use array of nested or sub-documents to be value of this history, and it shows the history price of this product. Again, in summary, similar to the previous bicycle example, you can see that variation is easy. The first product, which is a baseball bat, it has this document structure. The second product, which is baseball glove, it follows this different structure. And then the third product is a ball, follow this different structure. But all could be in the same database collection in our document model, just different structure and schema and so on. Again, about the query. Within document model, and in this example using MongoDB query, the query is quite simple. So we will learn about the query syntax, don't worry. But this one, we just refer to the database and then the collections. And then we say that we want to query or we want to find, and then we define the structure of field and value of the document that we want to look for. Okay, so in this case, we want to find any document, any product that has the value in field for the attribute position, as well as the value fields for the endorsed team attribute. And this becomes the return result. You can see here that what we look for is this position in field, and then endorsed with the team attribute fields. Here we will talk about object relationships. How could we model relationships among different documents within the collection? Similar to relational model, we can use the cardinality in order to see different ways of modeling the relationship. First, let's have a look of one-to-one relationship. We will then see the one-to-many and then many-to-many relationships as well. Relationship mechanism in document model will be based on two different ways that we will have a look together. They are called referencing and embedding. Here, in this example, suppose that we have a document called user document, okay, and we have another document called contact document, and then we have another document called access document. We want to have relationships among these three documents. That is, we model or we store data about the user in user document. Then we store details about the contact information, contact data of a user in contact document. And we store data about access control, access level of a user in what we call access document, and we make them referencing. So in this case, in this left-hand side case, is an example of how can we use referencing mechanism to model relationship. Here, remember we say that document model is a specialized key value model, right? So we do have concepts of key, but here in document model we usually call ID. So every document has a unique ID, and it is denoted by this underscore ID field. Alright, so you can see every of these document has underscore ID to model the document ID, and it must be unique. It can be given by a user, or it can be synthesized or auto-generated by the system as well. Okay, so in this example, we have a user document with this ID for the user 123XYZ. Okay, then we have the contact document, which we want to say that it's the contact data for that user 123XYZ, right? So this 123XYZ user is stored in the document with the ID object ID 1. Then another document object ID 2 for the contact. It uses a referencing mechanism such that it refers to the user ID with the value object ID 1 here, right? You can see from this. So that means this user ID object ID 1 refers to this document. Okay, let me remove some of this, otherwise we cannot follow things easily. Alright, then okay, let's just make this. We have object ID 1 for the user, and then we have object ID 2 for the contact document. But inside this contact document, it has a user ID field which refers to the user object ID 1. Okay, and then of course it has some other field such as phone, email, and so on. Then another document, which is access document, you can see it has its own ID, object ID 3, but again it refers to the access level, access control level for this user by using this referencing mechanism referring to the user ID 1. User ID, object ID 1, sorry. Okay, so this is an example of using referencing to make relationships of document from one document referring to another document. So it can be any document that use this referencing mechanism, but the idea is that it must refer to the document ID, okay, the global document ID, which is unique within the database. Okay, then on the right hand side, okay, have a look at the right hand side. This one is for is following embedding mechanism. It refers to or try to models and describes the same information but use different techniques. Okay, so instead of having 3 documents here, document 1 user document, document 2 contact document, and then document 3 access document. With the embedding mechanism, you can see we have only one single document here, just one document. And in this one document, the contact information or contact data of a user, you see, is embedded within the user document itself. And at the same time, the access data is also embedded within that user document. So it's embedded as a nested document or as a subdocument. Okay, so you have choices whether you want to use referencing mechanism or embedding mechanism. With referencing mechanism, you make use of ID or key, similar to the concept of primary key and foreign key in relational model, right? You refer to the key of another document, something like that. But with embedding, you make the data embedded or nested within your document without referencing out to another document. So, should we use referencing mechanism or embedding mechanism? Are there any differences, or is this just our choice? Is there advantages or disadvantages of each mechanism? So here I could give a general recommendation when it is for one-to-one relationship. The recommendation is to use embedding, because the advantages are that we have no additional data duplication, and actually it's also simple. We don't need to make use of referencing or kind of similar to foreign key, primary key kind of thing, right? And in terms of querying on the embedded field, actually you can use dot mechanism to refer to the sub or the nested field or nested document. For example, here in the example document on the right hand side, if we refer to the attribute request.type, what does it mean? It means here result document, result attribute, and then dot means in the embedded document, referring further to the type attribute. Okay, so result.type will refer to this. Okay, and what would be exceptional case or the disadvantages that we may need to consider as well? With the embedding, of course, when you make use of embedding mechanism, the resulting document will become large. I mean, if what you embed is very big, very huge, your document will become big, and sometimes in order to access the data, it could be slower because your document is too big. And actually, if you rarely access the field that you embed within the document, maybe you can remove it to not remove, but you can separate it into another document. So in case of infrequently accessed fields, then it may be better to use referencing mechanism in case of infrequently accessed field, and also that infrequently accessed field is large as well. Okay, if it is small, maybe you can keep it, but when these fields that you embed, they are large, maybe we can consider separate and use referencing mechanism. Next, we will talk about the one-to-many case. Again, with the one-to-many, you can model it within two possible ways. That is to use embedding. That means to embed whatever you want to refer to inside that document itself directly, or to use referencing mechanism. Okay, let's look at the embedding first. Here in this example, we are modeling data of patients in a hospital. Okay, and with the embedding mechanism, you can see general or patient profile would consist of, okay, ID for the document ID, then first name, last name, address, and so on. Then we have procedures, okay, that perhaps refer to the treatment, the procedures that happen with this patient. So it has many procedures, right? So we model by using array of procedures. Then inside this array, it is a nested or subdocument. This is subdocument number 1. This is subdocument number 2, which say that the procedure ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on this date, the type of the procedure, and then another procedure 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 on this date and with this type. Okay, a different way, compare it with the referencing. Okay, so with the referencing, you can see that the general profile about the patient remain the same. That is, we do have patient in the patient document, but then we make use of procedures as an array, but inside this array, instead of having a nested or subdocument, we list a key or a document ID that we want to refer to. So here, procedures has two ID referring to two documents. So the first one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, referring to the document in the procedures collection. Okay, here is the procedure collection, and it has a document with the ID. This is a document ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and another document with the ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Okay, so this mechanism, you can see, is similar to just foreign key and primary key concept, right? Where this can be considered as, this can be considered as primary key or the key of the document, right? Another one, this is another primary key or the key of another document. Then this is foreign key, referencing to these two keys. Okay. Again, then what would be the recommendation? Whether should we use embedding or should we use referencing? Again, general recommendation will say that we should use embedding when possible. Okay. Okay, here let me make a highlight. We use embedding when possible. The pros for the embedding, okay, because it happens that in many cases the many, I mean, it is one-to-many relationship, right? And then on the many sides, most of those documents or data we are referring to, embedding it within the document, for example, they are mostly weak entities. So we don't need to separate them into different collections, different documents, okay? And this would make access of all information within one single query, and querying becomes simple. Expressing a query within the same document is simple because we will see later when we do the practice, having referencing mechanism, using referencing mechanism will require to use join, but in this case we don't need to use join. No join is using, okay? But if you use referencing, you will face the situation that maybe that is similar to using join in relational database. Okay, then next advantage or benefit is that we can take advantage of update atomicity. We update in single document only, right? No need to update in multiple document or collection, and no additional data duplication is made, right? Query or indexing on the field become easy. And again, as I already mentioned, when you have the sub or nested document, you can refer to the attribute of field within the nested document by using dot notation. And there are some exceptions that you may need to consider. For example, in certain document store, the implementation of the document store may not allow you to store very big document. That means if your document grows very big because you embed everything inside, then you may reach the maximum size of the document, and that in that case you may need to separate your document and make use of referencing instead of embedding. For example, in some store, the maximum size of a document is 16 megabytes. If you exceed this size limit, you need to really separate your document, okay? And the same with the one-to-one case that we already consider, right? Some of the embedding document may be infrequently accessed, and in that case you can consider separate them into a different document and different collection. Okay, so here comes the last case of relationship cardinality, which is many-to-many. But keep in mind that one-to-many and many-to-one, they are the same. Okay, so let's consider many-to-many. This shows an example of many-to-many relationship using embedding mechanism. So the relationship expressed that many physicians works for many hospitals. And we use embedding to embed physicians inside hospitals. So look at hospital document here. This is for the document ID 1, which describe data about Hospital Oak Valley Hospital, and it has physician. Here, physician field is an array. You can see it is an array consisting of subdocuments, and each subdocument describes a physician who works for that hospital. So this subdocument 1 is for the doctor ID 12345, whose name is Joe Doctor, and so on. And then you can see there is another subdocument, okay, which is for the doctor 12346, whose name is Mary, well, and so on. Then if we look at the right hand side document, we can see that it is for the hospital Plainmont Hospital, okay, with the ID number 2. And if you look at the physician field, you can see that it is an array consisting of several or many physicians. And it has also that same doctor with the ID 12345, the Dr. Joe Doctor. So what is seen here is that data is duplicated. Data about Joe Doctor is duplicated twice, at least twice as shown here in 2 hospitals. If Joe Doctor works for 10 hospitals, his records will be duplicated 10 times in those 10 hospitals document, right? But in NoSQL, in document model concept, of course, the duplication or so-called data redundancy sometimes may not be a big issue. It really depends, okay? We will need to consider that. Whether is redundancy a big problem or not. Because remember, when we have redundancy, it leads to a problem of wasted storage, right? You store data multiple times, then you waste the storage. It may lead to data consistency because it may happen that data about Joe Doctor in different hospitals could be different. Let's say he changed his address, he changed his telephone, and so on. So it could lead to different data or inconsistency of the data. But we then need to consider whether that kind of problem is important or not, and whether we should avoid that problem or not. Okay, so for general recommendation, when we have many too many, should we use embedding or should we use referencing? From previous example, we saw the embedding case, but you can apply referencing to model many to many in a similar way as we saw in the one to many and one to one, right? You just use the concept of ID and the concept of key referring to the ID or something like that, okay? So the recommendation is that consider the use case. The use case or the requirement of the usage will determine and will tell you whether referencing or embedding is better, okay? As we already mentioned, if you use embedding, you will have a problem with data duplication, okay? So if data duplication is something you have to avoid, you cannot tolerate, because it have a problem with wasted storage, it has a problem with data consistency and so on, and that is not acceptable for your use case, then embedding is not a good mechanism, okay? But if duplication is acceptable, especially in the case that read dominate update, because you rarely update, you mostly read the data of that part. That means, for example, physician profile rarely been updated, okay? So it's not very frequent that he changed his information. Then it may be okay to use embedding and allows duplication to occur when reads dominate updates, because it will give faster access to the data. Okay, and actually it is possible to embed physician inside a hospital or embed a hospital information inside a physician. So which one to choose, it really depends on which one make the best out of the usage operation use case of your application. And referencing could be good if actually there are too many related items. The many-to-many becomes very complex and you should avoid duplication and so on. Then referencing will save the space and referencing will make data more correct and accurate. Okay, and also you can consider using hybrid approach as well. But in conclusion, you need to consider the use cases, the requirements, the operations of the data that you may need. Let's look at another example of document model with object embedding and object referencing. Here you could see an example of document model that model a project which is called Air Scanner project. It is part of the previous year DMM 2020 NoSQL project, and it used this diagram in order to represent how do we design our document structure and also the relationship among different documents. Okay, we have, for example, here document user. Okay, and we have document booking. And actually you could see that sometimes the rectangle does not always represent a document or the collection, but sometimes it represents only the concept. It is a kind of entity relationship concept, while we modify it in the way that we can use certain notation to explain that, for example, an address is an embedded object within the user collection. Okay. At the same time, you could see here for the collection booking, which describe about a booking that user make about the airlines, tickets, and so on. For a booking, we have booking number, booking status, and so on, right? And we have also who makes the booking, which user. So this is a kind of many-to-one, right? One booking refers to one particular user, but one user could have many bookings. Okay, and with this notation, it means it makes use of referencing. When we use embedding, we use this kind of diagram notation, and when it is a solid line, it means a referencing. Okay, so inside a booking document, we have tickets attribute, and one booking we can book many tickets, and it is an array of many sub-document or nested document, and using embedding mechanism. So a booking have many tickets, and each ticket is in this structure. Okay, so this is just an example of how can we make a document model design. And again, it can be schema-less, so it doesn't matter whether you have full field design. The document needs to strictly follow the schema that is designed here, or some of the document may have less attribute, may have more attribute. This is kind of an initial design that allows you to know that what could be there. Okay, when you make your document store, data store design. Okay, so here is list of references